They said he didn't belong the moment they saw him. Simple clothes, dark skin, too much ambition in his eyes for their comfort. And they made sure he knew it, sneering at his billion-dollar plan like it was a street hustle, laughing loud enough for the whole room to hear, recording every insult to share and shame him. But buried beneath their mockery was the one truth they never imagined, that he held the power to shatter their empire from within and force them to confront every ugly lie they told themselves about who deserves to succeed. If this story makes you think, hit like, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments what you felt reading this and where you're watching from. I want to hear your take on every twist. August Grant pushed open the grand glass door of Branch First National Bank with a hesitant breath, clutching his old leather portfolio tight enough to make his fingers ache. He knew what the place stood for the moment he stepped in: money, power, exclusivity. The marble floor gleamed like ice under the cold fluorescent lights, and the smell of expensive cologne and freshly ground coffee floated in the air with pretentious weight. His shoes, worn thin at the sole, clicked too loudly in his ears, an embarrassing reminder of the difference between him and the tailored suits that moved confidently through the lobby. His shirt was clean but old, the once crisp collar now limp with age, and the dark slacks had been pressed at home with an iron that left shiny lines along the seams. He wiped a bead of sweat from his temple and tried to compose himself. He had rehearsed this pitch 100 times, alone at night in his cramped apartment, staring into the cracked mirror, willing himself to speak clearly and with authority. Inside the portfolio was his $3.4 billion expansion proposal, his life's work. He reached the sleek reception desk, where a young woman with immaculately sculpted eyebrows and a crisp navy blazer regarded him with the blank, detached politeness of someone accustomed to dismissing people quickly. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound sure of himself. "I'm here to see Branch Director Preston Mallory. I have a 9 o'clock appointment." She looked him over with a slow blink, lingering on the frayed cuffs of his shirt before flicking her eyes back to her screen. "Name?" she asked with the bare minimum of interest. "August Grant." He heard the keyboard click, felt her reluctance in the silence that followed. Finally, she gestured lazily to a row of rigid chrome chairs lined up like an interrogation chamber. "Seat. He'll see you when he's free." He sat carefully, clutching his portfolio against his chest, eyes fixed on the ground. The hush of the lobby seemed to swallow him whole. He could hear the whispers. Two men in tailored charcoal suits glanced his way, smirking, one elbowing the other. A woman in a pencil skirt and towering stilettos looked him over like an insect on her windshield before turning away with a cold huff. He swallowed hard, tried to remind himself of the numbers, the projections, the promise of change. He'd built the plan from scratch, spent nights in the public library when he couldn't pay for internet at home, borrowed textbooks, worked 2 jobs to fund prototypes. It was solid. It deserved respect. 15 minutes passed before the heavy glass door to the upper office swung open. Out stepped Preston Mallory, lean and tall, with silver hair perfectly parted, a navy pinstripe suit so sharp it could cut glass, and shoes that gleamed like wet ink. He scanned the lobby slowly, eyes resting on August with obvious disdain, before he smoothed it into a politician's smile. "Grant." His voice was loud, carrying easily through the hush, making every head turn. August stood so fast he almost dropped the portfolio. He caught it clumsily, face burning as his papers shifted inside. Preston watched him with thinly veiled amusement. He didn't offer a handshake, just turned briskly and said, "Follow me." The office was vast, all glass and polished wood. A view of the city skyline spread out behind the massive mahogany desk like a prize to be flaunted. Preston settled into his chair, tapping a Montblanc pen on the armrest, as he watched August like a man watching a stray dog beg for scraps. He didn't offer him a drink, didn't ask about his day. He just gestured to the chair with a flick of his wrist. August sat carefully, back ramrod straight. "Thank you for seeing me," he began, voice cracking before he forced it steady. "I've prepared a comprehensive proposal for a $3.4 billion expansion. It's designed to create over 1,000 new jobs, expand our distribution network across 4 states, and address growing demand for sustainable materials. I have 3 partners ready to sign pending an anchor investor." Your bank would. Stop. Preston's voice was ice. August's mouth hung open a second before snapping shut. Preston regarded him with flat boredom, pen tapping a relentless rhythm. "Is that what you wore to pitch a $3.4 billion deal?" he asked finally, voice cutting through August's chest like a blade. August flushed. "Sir, this is the best I have. The numbers speak for themselves. If you'll just review." Preston's lip curled. "You honestly think a serious institution like this is going to hand over billions to a man dressed like that? Look at you." His voice rose deliberately. "We don't do charity. We're not a soup kitchen." August felt heat flush his face, tears sting his eyes. He blinked them back furiously. "Mr. Mallory, please, just look at the data." "The partners." Preston stood up so abruptly his chair squealed. His voice boomed. "Meeting's over." The words rang in the glass walls. The entire lobby outside fell silent. Through the glass, the receptionists and loan officers watched with open amusement. "We're done here," Preston repeated. "Don't waste my time or anyone else's." As he walked into the bank lobby again, he tried to straighten his shoulders, even though every instinct screamed that he should turn around and never come back. The receptionist glanced up with startled contempt that he dared to return. Her voice dripped with disbelief when she spoke into her headset. "Mr. Mallory, he's here again." The way she said he made August feel smaller than he had ever felt, as if he were a stray dog scratching at the door. When Preston emerged from the upper office, his smile was slow and predatory. "Grant," he called across the lobby in a tone that made several people look up from their phones and paperwork. "Did you forget something yesterday?" August gripped the handle of his portfolio and stepped forward. "Mr. Mallory, I'm not here to argue. I came to ask that you reconsider. The proposal deserves a fair review. I'm prepared to answer any questions you have." Preston's eyes glinted with something meaner than amusement. "Is that so?" he said, tilting his head as though studying an insect pinned to a card. "Very well. Let's do this here." He gestured to the open seating area where clients waited for appointments. August hesitated, glancing at the private offices just behind them. Preston saw the look and smiled wider. "The meeting rooms are reserved for real clients, Mr. Grant. Surely you understand." He swept his arm theatrically toward the low coffee tables and scattered chairs. "If you want my time, you'll take it here." August felt heat rise into his face, but he swallowed it down and nodded stiffly. He followed Preston to a cluster of seats near the tall glass windows where anyone walking by could see them. As he lowered himself onto a rigid chair, he realized the humiliating arrangement was deliberate, a stage for Preston's performance. Employees lingered near the reception desk, pretending to sort papers while their eyes flicked back again and again to watch. Preston settled into his seat with a sigh, as if this was all beneath him. He gestured at August's portfolio. "Go on," he said. "Enlighten us." August opened it, feeling how his hands shook. His voice came out low and strained as he began to speak, outlining the same details he had rehearsed so many times: the financial projections, the cost savings, the jobs that would be created. He barely made it 2 sentences before Preston held up a manicured hand to stop him. "Before you embarrass yourself further," Preston said loudly, turning slightly so the watching staff could hear, "let me ask you this. How do you spell partnership?" August blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. Excuse me?" Preston smiled like a vulture. "Partnership, since you keep claiming you have them. Spell it." August's mouth went dry. "Partnership," he said carefully, voice tight. A few scattered chuckles rose from behind the reception desk. Preston nodded mockingly. "Very good," he said, drawing the words out. "Now tell me, Mr. Grant, did you even finish school?" August's chest constricted. He knew this was not a question about his credentials. It was a public stripping of his dignity. "I graduated college," he said quietly. "Top of my class." Preston made a show of raising his brows. "Remarkable, truly. And yet here you are, sitting in the lobby of my bank, dressed like a janitor, asking for billions of dollars." Laughter rippled from the watching staff, louder this time. Someone behind him actually clapped, a single sarcastic burst that stabbed into August's spine. August swallowed and forced himself to keep going. "If you would look at the figures," he began, but Preston waved a dismissive hand. No, please continue. I'm fascinated to see what else you think you deserve." Every sentence he spoke felt like walking deeper into a pit he could not climb out of. He turned the page to show revenue charts, but Preston didn't even glance down. He was too busy surveying the gathering audience, smirking like he was hosting a cheap spectacle. The worst part, August realized, was that he had let this happen. He had come back hoping to be treated fairly, but instead he was handing Preston every opportunity to degrade him further. And yet he could not leave. He could not abandon this final attempt, even if it cost him the last scraps of self-respect. The murmurs grew as Preston picked up the proposal, flipped a few pages without reading, and dropped it on the table with a soft thud that sounded like a verdict. "I think we've heard enough," Preston announced, voice carrying across the lobby so that everyone could hear. By dawn, his eyes burned, but he had an answer prepared for every insult Preston had thrown at him, ready for the next pitch. He made a list of every other bank in the city, every lender that had ever shown interest, determined to prove Preston wrong. But as he started calling them one by one over the next week, his hope began to sour into confusion. The first bank he called was polite but oddly curt, the manager saying they were suddenly shifting priorities and wouldn't be reviewing new large-scale proposals this quarter. The next didn't even let him finish before explaining they weren't comfortable with the risk profile. A third told him bluntly they'd heard some troubling things about his operation and weren't interested in being involved. Each rejection felt like a slap, but what made it worse was the tone they all shared, a cautious politeness undercut by something cold, something suspicious. After the fifth rejection in 2 days, he sat on the edge of his bed with the phone in his hand, heart pounding with dread, as realization began to seep in. Preston was doing this. He knew it like he knew the sun would rise. Preston had picked up the phone, one call at a time, speaking in that calm, authoritative voice, dropping hints about due diligence and character concerns, poisoning every well before August could even drink. He imagined Preston's smirk as he made the calls, the same expression he wore when he forced August to spell out partnership for his personal amusement. He felt rage bubble up in his throat, but there was nowhere to aim it. He was just one man with a failing business and a ruined reputation. Late that night, he tried to distract himself with paperwork, anything to drown out the knowledge that he was being slowly choked out of his own industry. He checked his email obsessively for some good news, anything, but all he saw were auto-replies and thinly veiled brush-offs. On the fifth day, he got a call from his accountant, voice tight and hesitant, telling him that the company's main operating account had been flagged for compliance review. August's heart sank through the floor. "What does that even mean?" he demanded, voice cracking. The accountant stammered, explaining the bank claimed there were inconsistencies they needed to investigate, though they refused to say what they were. All the while, they'd frozen the funds entirely. August tried to explain there were payroll obligations, supplier bills about to clear, rent payments scheduled. The answer was the same. "Sorry, nothing we can do until it's resolved." He sat there, phone slipping from his fingers, listening to the dial tone buzz. A week later, he got an official letter in the mail, stamped with the bank seal, written in formal, sterile language that made his stomach turn. It said the review could take weeks, maybe months, with no guarantees, no timeline, no answers. Meanwhile, all the money he had scraped together over years of sacrifice, of hustling jobs and skipping meals and clawing for every cent, frozen. He couldn't even pay his own modest rent on the cheap office space where his one employee worked, a young kid who believed in the dream as much as August did. That evening, he sat alone on the floor of that office, the battered desk cleared of everything but his useless proposal, the cheap chair tipped over in the corner, his back pressed to the wall as he tried to breathe through the panic clawing up his throat. He tried to think rationally, listing options, but each one ended with a slammed door. Preston had made sure of it. August knew it wasn't just business. It was personal. Preston wanted to see him crawl. He wanted him to beg. He wanted to watch the humiliation continue beyond the walls of that pristine bank. And the worst part was that it was working. August felt it with every rejection email, every frozen payment, every sympathetic but cautious look from people who used to take his calls without hesitation. He saw it in the way suppliers hesitated when he called to promise payment would come soon, in the way they offered him forced apologies about having to ask for cash up front now. They weren't the polite rejections he'd come to expect. These were worse, crueler, personal. One, just read "ha ha ha, this you?" with a link. Heart pounding, he clicked it. A video played in shaky vertical footage, the bank's polished lobby clear in the background. There was August, slumped in the public chairs with his cheap portfolio on his knees. Preston Mallory's voice ringing with false patience as he said, "How do you spell partnership?" Laughter filled the audio, cold and gleeful. August's own voice cracked as he answered, face burning on camera. Preston's smirk was perfectly clear as he said, "Did you even finish school?" before dismissing him like trash. The clip ended with August gathering his papers with shaking hands. Head down, shame frozen forever in digital clarity. The caption read, "Wannabe billionaire gets put in place." He stared at it in silent disbelief. It had thousands of views already. Hundreds of mocking comments scrolled below. People were arguing over how funny it was, some calling him a scammer who deserved it, others making memes with captions about buying billion-dollar dreams at the thrift store. His fingers trembled so badly he dropped the phone. He picked it up, heart slamming against his ribs, and started to call the bank, but stopped. What would he say? That they had filmed him without permission? That it was humiliating? He knew exactly how they'd respond. It wasn't even the bank's official account. It was a teller or some employee who'd recognized a good piece of internet bloodsport and uploaded it. By afternoon, it was on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, every platform he could imagine. Friends who hadn't spoken to him in years sent worried messages. Some didn't bother to hide their curiosity about how it felt to be humiliated so publicly. He tried to call his wife before she saw it, but her line went to voicemail. He paced the kitchen, phone to his ear, listening to the beeps that mocked his panic. When she finally called back, her voice was shaking with anger and fear. "What is this, August? Why am I getting texts from people asking if you're a con artist? My own sister just sent me the video." He tried to explain, his voice cracking, telling her it was Preston's fault, that they were mocking him for being poor, for trying to dream big. But the words sounded pitiful even to his own ears. She cried, then hung up. He sat there in the silence of his failing home, head in his hands, tears soaking the cuffs of his cheap shirt. The next day was even worse. His teenage son, Marcus, didn't come home from school on time. August called and called, but Marcus didn't pick up. Finally, a teacher returned his message and explained in a quiet, cautious voice that Marcus had gotten into a fight, that he was in the nurse's office, that they needed him to come in. August took the bus because his old car was out of gas, walking the last few blocks with feet that felt like lead. When he entered the school office, Marcus sat there with a split lip and bruised cheek, eyes red and wild with shame. The principal greeted August with forced sympathy. "Mr. Grant, there was an altercation." Some of the other students were taunting Marcus with this. She turned her monitor around to show the video, paused on August's downcast face and Preston's triumphant smirk. Marcus flinched when he saw it, clenching his fists until his knuckles went white. "They called me the janitor's kid," Marcus spat, his voice cracking. "They said you were a fraud, that you were begging for charity." August's mouth worked soundlessly. He tried to reach for his son, but Marcus shrugged away, tears falling freely. "You said this would make things better." Marcus screamed. "You said this deal would change everything." August felt something shatter inside him. He apologized over and over, voice shaking, but Marcus wouldn't meet his eyes. Later that night, back home, August's wife sat in silence on the worn couch, scrolling through her phone with a blank expression. He tried to talk to her, but she turned the screen so he could see. It was an anonymous text. It read, "Tell your husband to quit the scam before he drags you all down." He just dropped a sealed envelope on the desk and cleared his throat. August stared at it, stomach twisting. "What is this?" he asked, voice hoarse from a sleepless night spent refreshing his bank account to see if the freeze had lifted. Joel didn't bother pretending. "My resignation," he said flatly. August felt the floor tilt beneath him. He scrambled to find the right words. "Joel, don't do this. We've worked together for years. We built this from nothing. We just have to get through this." Joel shook his head sharply. "It's not personal, August. But investors are calling me. They're spooked about the scandal with the bank. They don't want their names anywhere near this." He paused, swallowing. "I have a family to feed. I can't be tied to this anymore." The words were like a blade. August opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Joel turned away before the silence could deepen, leaving the door open behind him. August felt something crack in his chest, a hollowness spreading like rot. He picked up the resignation letter and read the single sentence twice before letting it fall from his fingers. He sat for hours afterward in that chair, the clock ticking mockingly in the silence. Outside the window, the city kept moving as if nothing was happening, as if he wasn't watching everything he'd worked for dissolve. He tried to think of solutions, but every plan died before it could form. His staff, what was left of it, avoided his eyes when he walked through the small warehouse. He heard the whispers. They all knew the video. They'd seen it. They'd seen their boss being humiliated, reduced to a punchline, and they knew the customers had too. Orders had stopped. Partners withdrew interest. He tried to call the last serious investor he had lined up, but the man's assistant answered with a careful, measured tone, saying they were re-evaluating the risk environment. August understood what that meant. He wasn't a risk. He was poison. By the end of the week, he was so desperate he jumped when the phone rang, hoping, praying. It was someone offering even the smallest break. Instead, it was a voice so calm it sent chills down his spine. "Mr. Grant," it said, smooth as oil. "I understand you're in a difficult position. I represent Branton Holdings. We'd like to help you." August swallowed, leaning forward. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Help? How?" The voice didn't miss a beat. "We're prepared to offer an emergency loan to cover your immediate payroll issues. Enough to keep your doors open." August's heart thumped painfully. It felt like a lifeline thrown into the ocean, but even as he reached for it, he heard the hook buried in the bait. "What's the catch?" he asked quietly. The line went silent for a breath. Then the voice said, "Nothing complicated. Just a simple restructuring of ownership. Branton Holdings would assume majority control to ensure proper management. You'd retain a role, of course, perhaps as an advisor." August's blood went cold. Majority control. The silence was broken by a sharp knock on the door that made him flinch. He rose slowly, heart hammering, and opened it to find Mr. Harlow, the landlord, standing with a folded paper in hand. The man's face was stiff, eyes avoiding August's. "Morning," Harlow said without warmth. "Got something for you." He handed over the paper. August took it, blinking at the bold letters at the top. "Notice to vacate." He felt his mouth go dry. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, voice cracking. Harlow didn't look up. "It's what it says. 30 days. No exceptions." August felt his stomach flip. "You can't just throw me out. I've never missed a rent payment." Harlow finally met his eyes, face lined with discomfort. "Look, it's not personal. I'm getting calls. People are warning me you're in some kind of fraud mess with the bank. They're saying you're toxic. I can't have that here. My other tenants are worried. I'm sorry." August's hand shook as he tried to speak. "That's not true. It's a lie. Preston Mallory is doing this to ruin me." Harlow's expression hardened. "Not my problem, Grant. I run a business too. I can't risk it. 30 days. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." And just like that, Harlow turned and walked away, leaving August standing in the doorway with the eviction notice crumpling in his fist. He felt something break inside him, a last fragile thread of hope snapping clean. He slammed the door and sank to the floor, clutching the paper to his chest like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He sat there for hours, barely breathing, the hum of the light above him like a cruel laugh. When he finally stood, it was only because his phone buzzed on the desk. He staggered over, picked it up with numb fingers, and saw the caller ID. A law firm. He answered with a voice that barely sounded human. "Hello." There was a pause, then a calm, cold voice spoke. "Mr. Grant, I represent Mr. Preston Mallory." August's grip tightened until the plastic creaked. "What do you want?" he spat. his voice cracking with rage and exhaustion. The voice didn't change. "We're calling regarding certain statements you've made, both to the press and on social media. Allegations of racism and professional misconduct. These statements are defamatory." August actually laughed, a sound that was more like a sob. "He humiliated me in front of the whole bank. He destroyed my business. He made sure everyone saw that damn video." The lawyer's voice was unbothered. "Nonetheless, you've made unsubstantiated public accusations. Unless you issue a formal retraction and apology within 72 hours, we will proceed with a defamation lawsuit." August's hand trembled so badly he almost dropped the phone. "You're threatening to sue me?" The lawyer sighed, as though talking to a child. "We're offering you an opportunity to avoid further damage. Retract the statements, apologize publicly, and this matter will end. Otherwise, my client is prepared to defend his reputation vigorously." He pressed his fists against his eyes until stars exploded behind them, then dropped them and let out a breath that trembled like it was made of glass. For the first time in days, he thought about giving up, about walking out of this office and never coming back, letting it all go to the vultures, letting Preston win. He thought about Marcus, bruised and humiliated, called the janitor's kid, about his wife shaking as she read the cruel text messages, about Joel resigning with his eyes on the floor, too ashamed to even say goodbye properly. The rage came back then, like an ember flickering to life in cold ashes. He remembered the years spent eating ramen and skipping meals so he could scrape together enough to build prototypes. The sleepless nights writing plans and pitches. The people he'd convinced to believe in him when he barely believed in himself. Preston Mallory didn't get to erase all that. Not without a fight. He walked unsteadily to the desk, picked up his phone with a hand that shook less than before, and scrolled through his contacts until he reached the one name he hadn't dared to use yet. The one he had been saving for when he had something real to show, when he felt worthy of it, when it wouldn't feel like begging. He stared at the number, thumb hovering. Then he pressed it and lifted the phone to his ear. It rang twice before a calm, amused voice answered. "August." "Been a while." August swallowed hard. "Mr. Lawton. Sorry to call so late." There was a chuckle. "It's never late for you, kid. I've been wondering when you check in. You sound terrible. Everything falling apart." August let out a breath that hitched in the middle. "You could say that." Lawton's tone sharpened slightly, the warmth still there, but edged with something like respect. "Tell me." And so August told him, not just about the humiliation at the bank or the viral video or the frozen accounts, but everything. The eviction notice, the threats of a lawsuit for telling the truth, his son's fight at school. He told it all in a low, tight voice, as if saying it out loud would shatter him if he wasn't careful. When he finished, there was a long pause. He thought maybe Lawton was disgusted, that even he would tell August to cut his losses. Instead, the old man let out a slow, thoughtful exhale. "I saw the video," Lawton said finally. "It pissed me off." August's head jerked. "You saw it." "Everyone saw it," Lawton said, voice hard. "But I knew better. I knew exactly what was happening while that smug son of a bitch played ringmaster. I kept waiting to see if you'd call." August's hand tightened around the phone. "I didn't want to come crawling to you." "Bullshit," Lawton snapped, not unkindly. "You think I helped you for charity all those years ago? You think I waste time on people who don't have it in them to fight back? You were supposed to call." August's voice broke. "I didn't know what else to do." Lawton let the silence hold for a beat. "Good. Now you're ready to listen. Let me tell you what you are going to do." Contracts were emailed, signatures demanded, funding authorized. August's fingers flew over the keyboard, reading and rereading every clause, determined not to let panic make him miss a single trap. It was his last chance to do this right. By noon, the papers were signed. August Grant, the man who'd been laughed out of a lobby for daring to ask for a loan, now held controlling interest in the holding company that owned the very bank Preston Mallory used as his personal stage to humiliate him. But buying the power wasn't enough. August didn't want quiet revenge or a polite handshake behind closed doors. He wanted Preston to feel the same public shame he'd inflicted on August, the same icy grip of fear in front of watching eyes. So he spent the next 48 hours gathering everything he had. He printed the leaked email chain where Preston called him a charity case. He printed the phone records showing coordinated calls to competitors, tanking August's credit. He found the compliance review letter freezing his account over vague manufacturer concerns. He printed the legal threat accusing him of defamation for telling the truth. Then he called every reporter who had ever given him the time of day. Some remembered him as the wannabe billionaire from the viral video. He didn't care. He told them to bring cameras. He promised them a story worth running. He booked a press room at a downtown hotel. Using the new power, he had to ensure no one dared turn him away. The morning of the conference, he wore a clean white shirt, ironed crisp, and a dark tie that wasn't new but was perfectly knotted. His hands trembled only once before he forced them still. When he stepped onto the small stage, the cameras flashed, microphones were thrust forward, and he saw the hunger in the eyes of the press, waiting for him to make a fool of himself again. He didn't blink. He began with the story they thought they knew, the viral clip, the spelling quiz, the public laughter. Then he explained the real story. He read the emails out loud, letting the ugly words echo in the hushed room. He displayed the account freeze letter, the compliance review with no reason. He read the threat of lawsuit for calling Preston a racist. The room shifted. Journalists who had come for mockery leaned forward instead, pen scratching. By the time he finished, the questions were shouted over each other. Is this real? Will you sue the bank? What's your next move? August looked into the cameras and spoke quietly but firmly. Preston Mallory destroyed my reputation because he didn't like the way I looked in his lobby. He weaponized his bank's power to ruin my company. But as of this morning, I'm the majority owner of the holding company that owns his bank. And we're going to talk about what real accountability looks like. The video of the press conference went viral by noon. But this time, he wasn't a joke. Commentators on TV debated systemic racism in banking. Talk shows booked experts to dissect the sabotage. Social media lit up with outrage. People sharing their own stories of humiliation in bank offices and job interviews, using August's name as a rallying cry. The next day, an emergency shareholders meeting was called at the bank's headquarters. August arrived early, carrying a single folder of documents. He walked through the same lobby where staff had once laughed at him, where the receptionist had sneered. This time she stood up so fast her chair fell over. Preston sat further down the table, hands folded so tightly his knuckles were bloodless, eyes fixed on the grain of the wood as if he could disappear into it. He hadn't spoken much since the vote stripping him of his authority, but now he was forced to sit here and listen. August waited until the murmurs died and all eyes turned to him before he spoke, voice clear, level, and impossible to ignore. "We're going to start by cleaning house," he said. He picked up a folder and opened it with slow precision, revealing page after page of documented abuses. He read aloud the email where Preston mocked August's appearance, calling him a charity case unworthy of serious money. He read the one where Preston bragged about warning other banks to avoid doing business with him, planting rumors that he was a fraud. He read the transcript of the legal threat threatening August with defamation for telling the truth. The room was silent except for the steady, cold recital of Preston's worst acts, each word landing with the weight of a gavel. August didn't embellish. He didn't shout. He simply read the evidence out loud so no one could pretend they hadn't heard. Preston's face turned a mottled red, his breathing shallow and ragged, but he didn't interrupt. He couldn't. When August finished reading, he closed the folder with a soft thump that seemed to echo. He let the silence stretch for a long moment before he spoke again. This institution enabled a culture where racism wasn't just tolerated, it was weaponized for profit and personal amusement. That ends now. He turned his gaze directly to Preston, who finally looked up, eyes glittering with humiliation and rage. Effective immediately, Preston Mallory is terminated from all roles at this bank and any of its subsidiaries, August said, voice like iron. Preston flinched visibly. A few board members exhaled sharply, some in relief, some in fear. August didn't pause. His severance is revoked. His pension is frozen pending the outcome of an internal review. And he will be barred from entering these offices ever again without legal clearance. Preston opened his mouth, finally finding words. "You can't do this," he choked. "I built this bank. I made it profitable. You're nothing but a charity case with a lucky break." August didn't blink. "You built it by excluding people like me, by humiliating them for sport, by teaching everyone in this building to see us as jokes. That's over." Preston's mouth worked uselessly. No one came to his defense. No one moved to stop August. The board members looked anywhere but at Preston, the silence of their betrayal ringing louder than any words. August turned to the company's HR chief and legal counsel, both of whom sat stiffly at the far end of the table. "Make sure the paperwork is finalized today. Security will escort him out." Neither hesitated. They nodded, scribbling notes furiously. Preston pushed back his chair so hard it screeched, shoving to his feet. He glared at August, voice cracking with impotent fury. "You think this is over? You think they're going to follow you? They're going to turn on you the second you slip. You don't belong here." August didn't stand. He didn't raise his voice. He just stared at Preston with the calm of a man who had nothing left to fear. "Get out." Security appeared in the doorway. Preston hesitated, face red and twisted, but no one moved to help him. When he finally stalked from a room, the door clicked shut behind him with a finality that felt like exhaling after holding breath too long. August let the silence linger, letting everyone in the room understand what had changed. August Grant sat alone in the massive corner office that used to be Preston Mallory's domain, staring at the city skyline through glass that felt too clean and too wide for a man who'd spent years working in cramped back rooms and dingy rentals. The desk before him was empty except for a legal pad covered in scrawled notes about new policies, initiatives he planned to push through despite the board's polite resistance. Even after the board meeting that saw Preston escorted out, even after the hush that fell over the staff who'd once laughed at him behind their polished counters, August knew he wasn't done. Firing one man didn't fix the system. He had promised change, real change, and the press was watching now. The regulators were watching. The world was watching. He leaned back and closed his eyes, exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. The past few weeks had stripped him bare, taken everything he'd built and smashed it, only to hand him the reins of the machine that destroyed him. He could still see his son's bruised face, his wife's shaking hands as she deleted cruel messages from strangers. He could see Joel's resignation letter in the trash. He refused to let it all be for nothing. He was making a list of grant programs for minority-owned businesses, of low-interest community loans, of scholarships for Black and brown students in finance. He was planning quarterly audits, anti-bias trainings, independent oversight. But for all the policies and bullet points, he knew there was something else he needed to do. Something harder. He didn't want to see Preston Mallory ever again. But that wasn't going to be an option. The request came quietly, a text from Lawton's lawyer that simply read, "He's asking for a meeting. Says it's personal. Up to you." August read it a dozen times, thumb hovering over the delete button. But he didn't press it. The meeting was held after hours, in a private conference room, lit only by the streetlights bleeding through the blinds. August didn't wear a suit. He sat in his usual crisp shirt and slacks, the same kind that had gotten him laughed out of this building once. He didn't bother to stand when the door opened and Preston shuffled in. Preston looked like a ghost of the man who used to stride these halls with cruel certainty. His expensive suit hung looser, hair no longer perfectly styled, but limp and graying at the temples. He didn't make eye contact right away, staring at the floor with a 1,000-yard stare that made him look older, defeated. August waited in silence, watching him. When Preston finally spoke, his voice was husky, cracking in places. "I'm not here to beg for my job," he said without preamble. "I know that's done." August didn't respond. Preston swallowed hard, throat bobbing. I wanted to say I was wrong." The words hung between them, heavy, raw. August didn't move, didn't even blink. Preston kept going, voice thick. "I thought I was better than you. I thought you didn't belong here. That people like you were just trouble waiting to happen. I saw your clothes, and I decided you were nothing. Less than nothing. And when you pushed back, I wanted to break you so you wouldn't make me look bad. I wanted everyone to see you fail so they'd know I was right about you." He finally raised his eyes. They were red-rimmed, desperate. "But I was wrong. I was wrong about you. About everything." August's jaw flexed, but he still said nothing. Preston's breathing hitched. "I'm sorry." He exhaled like it hurt. "God, I'm so sorry. For the video. For the bank sabotage. For everything I did to you. I didn't even think about your kid, your family. I just wanted to win." The silence stretched, swallowing every creak of the old HVAC, every buzz from the street outside. August felt something crack deep in his chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something that was willing to look at Preston as a human being, instead of just the monster who had wrecked his life. He spoke finally, voice like ground glass. "Do you know what you did to my boy?" Preston flinched but nodded. "I saw the news reports. The protests. The op-eds. I know what they called him at school. I know what they said to your wife. I know what it cost you." August shook his head slowly. "No, you don't. You'll never know. But you can try to make it right." Preston looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" August leaned forward, folding his hands. "You want forgiveness? Then you work for it. You will stand in front of the same people who laughed with you and tell them what you did. You will lead the anti-bias training in this city. You will explain how easy it is to dehumanize someone because they don't look like you, because they don't dress like you. You will use every ounce of shame you feel now to teach them so they don't do what you did." Preston's eyes watered. He opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, I'll do it." August nodded once. "And you're not getting paid for it." Not a cent. Preston almost laughed, but it broke off as a sob. He wiped his eyes, then nodded again. "Fine. Good. I don't want your money. I don't want your pity. I want your honesty. I want your apology in front of the world, not just me. And I want you to stand there while they ask you why you did it." Preston wiped his face with shaking hands. "I will." August stood slowly, feeling the ache in his bones from weeks of tension and fear and rage. He extended a hand. Preston hesitated, then took it with both of his, clutching it tight like it was the only thing holding him up. August didn't smile, but he didn't pull away. When Preston finally left, August sat down alone in the quiet room, feeling the weight of everything he'd agreed to do. He didn't feel victorious. He felt responsible. He felt ready. The next morning, he called his wife and told her he loved her before she could ask about the bills. He took Marcus to school himself, riding the bus with him, talking about anything but money. He walked into the bank headquarters with a list of new programs under his arm. Small business grants, diversity scholarships, community listening sessions, fair lending audits. He set them on the boardroom table and waited for the arguments to start. And when they did, he didn't flinch. Because the end of humiliation wasn't enough. He wasn't here just to punish Preston Mallory. He was here to change the entire dam system. And he wasn't going to stop until he did. The end. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in our series of powerful, thought-provoking narratives. I'd love to hear what you think about this plot. Was the redemption satisfying? Did the twists keep you hooked? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell me where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how many places these stories reach. Your feedback helps shape future episodes, so don't be shy. Let's keep the conversation going.